Life Audio.
Welcome to Empowering Homeschool Conversations, your authority in navigating the world of homeschooling diverse learners. Featuring Peggy Ployhar from SPED Homeschool, Annie Yorty from AnnieYorty.com, Leilani Melendez from Living with Eve, Stephanie Buckwalter from eLARP Learning, and Dawn Jackson from Dawn Jackson Educational Consulting and Tutoring. With over 75 years of combined homeschooling expertise, experiences, and perspectives, this group is eager to share their wealth of wisdom to empower your homeschooling journey. So grab your favorite mug, settle in, and get ready for insightful discussions, valuable insights, and practical tips as these experts and their guests dive into the hottest topics in homeschooling. Whether you're a seasoned homeschooler, just considering this path, or anywhere in between, you don't want to miss a minute of these enlightening conversations that will empower your child to thrive in their homeschool environment. Empowering Homeschool Conversations is starting right now. Join us to give your homeschool the power boost it needs to successfully educate the unique learners in your home.
Today, we are going to talk about Whole-Child Readiness, simple steps to prepare kids for learning body, mind, and soul. And my special guest today is Heidi. Oh, Heidi, I forgot to ask, how do you say your last name? So I'm going to have you say it.
Heidi Tringali, yeah.
Tringali. Yes, I would have massacred that. Thank you. Heidi, pediatric occupational therapist, speaker, writer, and mother of 2 adult children. Heidi holds a Bachelor of Arts degree in special education and psychology from Hastings College and a Master's of Science degree in occupational therapy from T.O.T.S University. She has practiced as an occupational therapist for over 30 years. Heidi founded the Tringali Occupational Therapy Services, or T.O.T.S, in 2006 in response to an identified need for occupational therapy services in independent schools. Since then, she's expanded and now provides support and consulting services to independent schools and preschools throughout the country. She provides training and education to faculty and families on topics related to classroom success and maximizing student performance. Heidi's currently licensed in Maine, North Carolina, and South Carolina, and a member of the American Occupational Therapy Association. Welcome, Heidi, to the show. I'm so excited to have you here and to talk about this subject.
Thank you.
Yeah. So often the first question I ask my guests when they come on is, why are you so passionate about this topic? There's usually a story or something that just drives you specifically to have enough to say in an hour on the topic.
Yeah. I think if we track it way back, I had a brother with Down syndrome. So we just kind of were raised in a family to be respectful and kind and appreciative of everybody, regardless of what they're dealing with. And as I became an OT, what I found out was that a lot of our kids are just misunderstood. And that's really what wakes me up every morning, is just to make sure that to help that child that's misunderstood. It might be that it's a dysregulated child who is viewed as a behavioral child. It might be a learning issue that's dealt with as a low IQ. And so that's kind of what drives me every single day. And just to be an advocate and a voice for a misunderstood child, that's will probably keep me doing this until I'm 100.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, it's amazing how those experiences within our immediate families can really affect the trajectory of our lives, just because God gives us compassion for people that we wouldn't have had that compassion for had we not had that experience. And I think a lot of parents that I've talked to over the years, they sometimes feel guilty that they have this kind of typically functioning child. And then they've got another child with a lot of needs. And just as an encouragement to them, based on your story and so many others that I've heard, is that it's not a deficit. There's something that God has planned for every child in your family. When you go through hardships, they change how we think. They change what the compassion that we have. And so, so that's awesome. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about Whole-Child Readiness. And if you're watching, we have viewers popping on. Usually it takes a little while for people to get on and to start conversing with us, but we'd love for you to be part of the conversation. That's why we're live. And so just if you feel like either your child has started school and we're running into problems, they don't seem to be ready to learn or even inspired to learn. What might be going on? Or maybe you even have a diagnosis. You think that's kind of figured out what you're dealing with, and yet you seem to still be hitting roadblocks. We want to know what you're struggling with, and how we can help you with this conversation as well. So definitely put those in the feed, and we'd love to address them. Yeah. So I think a good place for us to kind of get started is we talk about school readiness and we talk about learning readiness. And is there a difference? And if so, what is that?
Yeah, I think that a long time ago they were interchangeable, and rightfully so. So when you got to school, you were ready to learn. But throughout the change in the way that we, our kids have been raised in the environment that has been kind of evolved in the United States, they're now different, because school readiness looks like you have your lunchbox and you have your book bag and you brush your teeth. That's school readiness. But you can have all of those things and get to school and not be ready to learn. And so the easiest definition I have of learning readiness is, and this we talk about it with kids, but it's adults too. It's true for everybody. We're all going to perform to our fullest potential if we show up cognitively organized, physically calm, and socially connected. And that's the definition of learning readiness, because if every child shows up to the demand placed on them, organized, calm, and connected, they can perform to their fullest potential. If you show up or a child shows up disorganized, excitable, and disconnected, all bets are off. And you don't know what you're going to see. You don't know what you're going to get. And then starts the cycle of the potential for being misunderstood.
Absolutely. Yes. And then you get a classroom of them and it gets crazy.
Yes.
So,
yes.
But yeah. But I think as parents, we don't even know how to recognize, or if we do see a child that's in one of those states or dysregulated in one of those ways, that we don't feel like we really have the power to do anything over that either. And so I know you're going to talk about that, but I just want to express that question, because I think a lot of times we feel like there's just, and that's what I deal with every day. I mean, I've heard it from so many parents is, yep, that's our house. That's just the way we roll. And so the thought pattern even, or the ability to even change the thought pattern that there could be something different, is sometimes it seems like a dream for a lot of parents.
I always tell parents too, I said, when you see a kid throwing a stinky fit in the grocery store, you have one of three reactions. You want to help them, spank them, or medicate them. And it doesn't matter what your reaction is. It's just, you have to know that's your gut reaction, because if you want to help them, you tend to be a functionalist, which means you believe you can make the situation better for the child. If you want to spank them, you're a behavioralist. You believe behavior mod works. Just a good, as my mom used to say, a good spanking will take care of that behavior. And then if you want to medicate them, you tend to be a diagnostician, where you see the world through diagnoses. And teachers will come to me and they'll say, I want you to take a look at this kid, probably a little ODD, maybe some ADHD, maybe some ASD, a little, and they start throwing, and I'm like, okay, I get you. You see the world through diagnosis.
Thrown in there, yeah.
Yeah. And it's really important. Like I tell people, this isn't a therapy session. It's not important that we fix what you are. You have to identify what you are, because under stress, we go back to what we know. And so when we're stressed out because of our child's underperformance, we go back to what we know. So if I'm a behavioralist, I'm going to behavior mod the heck out of whatever's going on. I'm going to get frustrated. My child's going to get frustrated. And we have to, and I always tell people, behavior mod does not work on dysregulation. And regulation does not work on diagnosable stuff. You really just have to be like, wait, we've got to sort it out. That's my favorite part of what I do, is getting to get in there, roll your sleeves up, and figure out what's going on with the child, and to figure out, is it something that OT can help with? Is it a regulation issue? Is it a behavioral issue? Can we do some counseling and do behavior monitoring, get it cleaned up, or does it need to be diagnosed? But when you think about the idea of being cognitively organized, physically calm, and socially connected, what does disorganized look like? It looks like disorganized language, purposeless play, difficulty recalling previously information. When you hear that, you think learning issues. When you see an excitable kid who's all over their chair and falling out, you think ADHD. When you see a disconnected kid with low eye contact, you think autism. And so you can see how dysregulation or the lack of learning readiness can look like a diagnosis and send us down a path that can get so tricky. And I tell people all the time, those are all very real diagnoses, like all learning disabilities, ADHD, autism, very, very real diagnoses. I think sometimes because we skip over the readiness and regulation piece of it, some of our kids get those diagnoses that maybe don't really have them. And then we end up on a path that doesn't work. I'll just give you the example of ADHD. So if you have a little dysregulated kid who just needs proprioception, but they get diagnosed with ADHD, then they get medication. Medication doesn't treat the proprioceptive issue. And so then it's that long path. No medication works. And so that's why it's so important to first look at readiness before we even go on down the path to look at everything else.
That's so true. Yeah. And yeah, it seems like just this mishmash. So having an expert be able to come in and because like you said, we've got these instinctive ways to react to things. And I think we kind of train ourselves over time then that is just the way our child is, because based on how we instinctively react to them. And then be able to have a second person come in with a new set of eyes, maybe, and the knowledge to be able to look at things from multiple different ways or pathways of what might be underlying, can change that situation in just minutes because of an understanding that we never had, or we were just never could conceive as being the thing that our child is really struggling through. We will continue this conversation after a short break.
This is Empowering Homeschool Conversations, provided by SPED Homeschool, a nonprofit that empowers families to home educate diverse learners. To learn more, visit spedhomeschool.com.
Yeah, that makes me think like when I talk about the misunderstood child, when we misunderstand them, they then misunderstand themselves. And there's kind of this sequence that you go through life. So our young kids, like, 0 to 8, those kids, we want to teach them to accurately self-assess. Like, I tell people all the time, I want you to be able to tell me with the same level of confidence what you're good at and the thing you're working on. And because then that gives you accurate self-assessment, which then in the next phase of your life, which is sort of middle school, it allows you to self-advocate, accurately and independently self-advocate, because you're asking for what you need because you understand yourself. Being able to self-advocate then allows you to successfully launch. And so it's so important. So no matter where I get involved along the way, we have to kind of, I stay true to that framework of like, do we have an accurate self-assessment? Then, and the earlier you do it, the better. I just have a little guy in here and he's 4, and I was at his preschool the other day and his teacher said, the craziest thing about this little guy, he asked for what he needs. And I was like, good. That's exactly what, he'll say, like, I need to have some alone time. Or he told the kid, he's kind of the kid that his name comes off of everybody's tongue first because he creates the issues in the classroom. And he looked at all of his classmates. He said, you need to stop blaming me for everything. That's what he said to him at 4. I was like, yes. It was the sweetest little thing.
That's great. Yeah. Yeah. If they have the ability to see those things, yes, it does give them, like you said, as they get older, that ability to advocate for themselves versus a lot of kids that age then would turn to self-blame if they could not identify it. And so there's huge repercussions in that transition age, because when they're younger is what I've kind of heard in past interviews is that they'll always see it as an external, as there's something else causing that, until they flip to a certain age, and then they start pointing back internally that there's something wrong with me. And you don't want to let it go to that point if you have the ability to stop it before then.
Yeah. And we have the capacity to model it. And we have a lot of adults that aren't good at it either. So I tell people at dinner, sit around and say, this is the one thing I'm working on, and this is something I'm really good at, and say it with the same level of confidence. It's really funny. I've seen from like 4 to 7, 4 to 10, probably. Girls identify with their weaknesses very confidently and struggle to identify what they're good at. And boys identify what they're good at. And I'll say, well, what's something you're working on? Nothing really. I'm pretty good at everything. Like, they don't identify with their weaknesses. And so I always help them both. I'm like, with the same level of confidence. That's the important part, is with the same level of confidence. I want you to tell me what you're good at and what you're working at, because by God's design, that's perfect. And so we can't ignore one or the other.
Yeah. Yes. That's a great strategy to be able to do that. And I know dinner time was always the greatest learning time in our house when our kids were growing up, because there's so many interesting conversations you could have, and we, to just encourage sitting there longer. And I know that seems to be a thing of the past for many families, but just encourage you to take that time. I know we actually did a survey a couple of years ago, and the time when parents would read our emails the most was at 6:15 at night, dinner time. And that just made me sad. I'm like, aren't you making dinner? Aren't you sitting with your kids? And so I just want to encourage you to really carve out that time and make that time to be together. Absolutely.
Probably a little bit later, we'll be talking about group membership skills, like helping socialize your children. And the 3 that I love the most are being a first-time listener, holding a thought, and unentertained waiting. Like, if you teach your kids those 3 skills, they're going to thrive in a group setting. And at dinner,
absolutely.
So I tell them at dinner time, I'm like, here's how I want you to practice holding a thought. I said, at dinner time, you're all going to sit down and you're going to start the conversation. You say, we're going to go around the table, and I want you to share the funniest thing that happened today. I'm going to go first. And you tell your story, and they have to wait, and they have to hold their thought, because you're teaching them to hold. Because what I think most dinner tables look like is like, we sit down, we're rushed, we're shoveling food in, and the kids talk, and we're just like, my time to eat, and we don't get to really work on any skills, And so, and I tell them, I'm like, every night, make your story a little longer and a little longer and a little longer, because when you sit in a group setting, you sit in a group setting, if there's 12 kids there, someone is number 12 to share. Someone has to hold their thought.
Exactly.
12 kids. And if you send 12 kids in who cannot hold a thought, it's chaos in that group. And there's just,
it is. They all have to blurt out, and they can't wait their turn. It's, I see a lot of that lately.
Yeah. And it doesn't matter the size of the group. You just have to, if you can come with those 3 skills, and I, talk about, holding a thought, being a first time listener, and waiting without entertainment. And probably waiting without entertainment is the hardest one, because no one does it anymore.
Oh, absolutely. I didn't even think about that. Yes.
So they get
entertained these days.
So they get to school, or, any setting where there's more than just them, and they're forced to wait, and they've never done it before. And so then that's when they get in trouble. That's when the phone calls start going home, is, he's touching his friends in line. He's getting out of line and going and entertaining himself, because he never had to just sit and wait, So I tell parents, I'm like, Saturday morning, go grocery shopping, take your long list, take your kids, buy everything, get to checkout, look for the longest line, get in it. And then you're going to tell your kids, listen, you don't get my phone, you don't get an iPad, you don't get a game, you don't get a snack, you don't get a toy. I'm not going to entertain you. You have something more powerful than any of those, and it's your brain. And when you're not bombarding your brain with input, it starts creating and developing output. So I can't wait when we get to the end of the line to hear what you and your brain did. And that's how you practice.
Oh, I love that.
Unentertained waiting.
That's so good. So how would you define learning readiness if a parent was to ask, how do I know? Or what do you define that as?
Yeah, so it is, I definitely define it as cognitively organized, physically calm, socially connected. I'll tell you what each one of those look like. When you show up that way, though, you're allowed to perform to your fullest potential. There's a lot of things we can't do anything about. We can't do anything about IQ. That's get what you get, you don't throw a fit. We can't do anything about the learning disability that you have. We can't do a ton about your ADHD. That's, we can medicate it or not, but those are things that you get. You can move the dial on learning readiness, which I can get a child who is disorganized, excitable, disconnected. I can get them organized, calm, and connected by a series of activities. And so here's what, when you're looking at for organization, what you're looking for is a child who plays with purpose. So if they go into a playroom, they sit down and play with toys with either a creative or a purposeful end result way. Our disorganized kids will go in and tear up a playroom in 2 seconds because they get it all out and they're super excited about it and they're just touching everything, but they have no plan because their brain is disorganized. And so that's purposeless play is a big one. Verbal articulation is another one. So if you have a child who's in speech therapy and they've plateaued on their articulation, bring them back to OT. I'll get them regulated, and then their verbal articulation, verbal organization. So can tell a story with a beginning, middle, and end. So our little ones that come up and they start just throwing nouns and verbs at you, and you're working really hard to put the story together. That's disorganization as well. So those are some signs of disorganization. Physical excitability is that kid who's just all over the chair, and has very low body awareness and has to touch the walls when they're walking down because when they're walking down the hall, have to touch the walls because I can't tell where I am compared to where everybody else is. When you tell them to sit down, they sit really close to you because they can't tell how far away they are from you. And so those are all proprioceptive issues. And then our socially disconnected kid, I always describe as no consequence matters. The parents will come in, they're like, they don't give great eye contact and no consequence matters. And so they're like, I took all of their toys away, all their privileges away. They have no I'm like, then it's not that. So then it's not exactly. You're using behavior mod on it. We've got something else going on. So that's what a disorganized or a disconnected child looks like.
We will continue this conversation after a short break.
This is Empowering Homeschool Conversations, provided by SPED Homeschool, a nonprofit that empowers families to home educate diverse learners. To learn more, visit spedhomeschool.com.
To get there, it's the interesting piece of it is that this all lives in your sensory system. Yeah. And so we have 3 senses that are responsible for organized, calm, and connected. They're all movement-based senses. So when we think back of the last 20 to 40 years, what we've done to childhood development, we have back to sleep, and we put babies on their back. And if that would be the only thing that affected childhood development, it would be bad. But it's more than that. We had back to sleep. We had car seats. And then screens. And I say, this is what childhood looks like now. Back to sleep, car seat, screen. That's the amount of motor activity kids get. They're on their back. They're restrained in a 5-point car seat. They're plugged into a screen. To organize your brain, it's your vestibular system, which is the fluid in your inner ear. And the way we stimulate that is by swinging, spinning, and hanging upside down. And so that's our organizing activities. And then you compare it to back to sleep, car seats, and screens. So even when you take kids today and you say, bend over and touch your toes, they keep their head up because they don't like to be inverted.
Right.
And their hamstrings are tight because they've been sitting so much. And so they can't bend over and touch their toes. which I tell teachers, I'm like, this is the greatest activity you can do. It takes 2 weeks to teach it because they can't do it. It feels uncomfortable to them. So swinging, spinning, hanging upside down are organizing activities. The ones that calm us are the ones in our proprioceptive system, which is just a fancy name for the receptors in your tendons, ligaments, and joints. So you have little receptors in your tendons, ligaments, and joints. And what they do is they tell you where your body is in space. So if you shut your eyes right now, you can't see your body, but you can feel where it is. That's your proprioceptive system telling you that.
Yeah.
When that system gets stimulated by jumping, hopping, stomping, running, pushing, pulling, again, in comparison, back to sleep, car seats, screens, it activates serotonin, which is calming. So it's like a runner's high for kids. So they need that. So so I tell parents all the time, I'm like, if you've got a little guy who's all over his chair, our natural parenting instinct is to say, sit still, because we're trying to ready them for the world. And you can't be 20 years old crawling all over your seat. So I'm going to tell you to stop it. I said, from today forward, when you see a child all over their seat, what you're going to say is, hey, I can tell your body's trying to calm down. Let's do some more joint pressure. Let's jump on the trampoline. Let's do some chair push-ups. So it's real specific types of movement that get this state of organized, calm, and connected. And then the last one is the cool one. It's your deep pressure system, which is a hug.
Yeah.
And so when we get deep pressure through our skin and muscles, it releases dopamine, which helps us feel connected, which is what we are getting on screens now. We just go plug into our screen and get that sense of dopamine instead of the good one where we get a hug. So when I talk to teachers about this all the time, they're always saying to me, they're like, oh, I love this. It's hang, hop, hug. And that's how they start every teaching, is they hang upside down for 60 seconds, hop in place for 60 seconds, give yourself a self hug for 60 seconds, and it readies their body so they can be organized, calm, and connected.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. I know playgrounds, a lot of things that we used to play on. I have been, some kids even told me the jungle gyms are off the school playgrounds now because they're too dangerous. And there's just so many things in our U.S. culture that have changed. I went to Norway recently, and they've got these 2-story high structures. And I had my husband film me while I went up one. I was like, this is so fun. Why do they not have these in the U.S.? But we've taken so many things away. And I had a conversation with my daughter when she was home for college break. And she said when she worked retail, there were parents pushing their kids in strollers who knew how to walk. And because I've been seeing a lot of issues with ankle strength when I teach aerial. And the kids keep rolling their ankles because they don't have that strength. They don't even walk anymore. And so there's just so many issues. So there's just a lot of stuff. I mean, you've mentioned a couple. Is there other things that have led to just this overwhelming amount of dysregulation that we have seen in our society, kids and adults? We're just as responsible and have as many issues.
Well, the interesting thing is that it's all with good intent that we've done this. And we've had, so Back to Sleep was back in like 1991. And the whole point was to prevent SIDS. Unfortunately, it was an initiative by the American Pediatric Association. Unfortunately, it was called Back to Sleep, Tummy to Play. And no one heard that. And so as Americans, we supersize it. And so if I'm going to keep my child on their back when they're sleeping, I'll keep them on their back all the time. And the toy industry started building those arch toys.
Oh, yes. That was about the same time that came out. Yes.
And then shortly thereafter, the helmet industry came out to fix the shape of the head because they laid them there for so long. And I say that alone changed upper body strength, neck strength, and extremities, hands. It changed all core strength. And then, also between, I think it was 75 and 85 or 72 and 85, we passed, every state in the country passed a law for car seats. So Back to Sleep was for SIDS. And I don't know if you know, but after a while, they realized it didn't cut back on SIDS the way they thought it was. So they changed it to Safe to Sleep, and it includes bumpers and temperature and blankets and all that other stuff now. But we haven't stopped putting kids on their back because of fear. We parent from fear. And then we put car seats by law. You have to have your child in a car seat. Again, a very good idea. I always tell the story about my mom who was telling about how she was driving my brother home from the hospital. And she goes, she always drove really fast. And she said, I saw a cop and I slammed on the brakes and he rolled off the car seat onto the floor. And I'm like thinking car seat, like literal bench car
in the car.
seat.
Yeah.
Yes, laying on the car seat. Right. She slammed on the, and I was like, that's great vestibular is what that is. That's great proprioception. And I tell people, like, by law, you can't not have, you have to have your kids in a car seat.
Right.
But by law, they only have to be in that seat in the car. And we put a handle on it and we made it a bucket and we put it fits on a stroller and it fits in a grocery cart and it fits on the counter. And if you're super fussy, it fits on the dryer. And if you're a second and third kid, you're lucky to ever get out of them because we just carry them around a bucket. And then the screens from there, when you do get released, we plug you into a screen, which there's just the evidence is just pouring in on how bad screens are for kids emotionally, visually, socially, intellectually. Like, it's bad. I tell people, like, do you think screens are bad for everybody? And I'm like, the one, I think if you have a severely handicapped child who can't get out and experience life, that's a beautiful way for them to experience life, is to get to see underwater fish and, because it's very beautiful. Yeah. But if you have a child who is able to get them out playing in the mud, the mud's much better. So that's the only time I could see that screen in early development would be relevant. Otherwise, people ask me all the time, they're like, what's your screen recommendation? And I'm like, 0. Nothing. Yeah. You are trying to raise a child and fully develop them emotionally, spiritually, intellectually, socially, physically. That's a lot. And none of it comes from a screen. So, and now we're seeing it's the opposite. It's negative comes from a screen. So those are big things. I think the pandemic was a multiplier. Like when we were having, like, kids were coming out of the pandemic, I think we forget about, like, how traumatizing the pandemic was, like, that we were trying to keep family members alive. We were trying to figure out if we had a job. We were trying to figure out who we could and could not touch. We were living in, like, this massive traumatic fear, and we were raising kids in that. And so I always tell people, count back to that period of time, and whatever that was supposed to happen developmentally for your child didn't. Like, no matter what, it didn't. And so those skills are missing. So they're 4 years post now, missing skills that they would have learned 4 years ago. And we have to fill that in somehow, because it's making our kids look difficult to understand.
Right. So, yeah. I never thought about that. Those kids are entering, especially those that were preschoolers, toddlers, and really learning by example. They're the ones entering school right now. And it's not a wonder why they're struggling as much as they are. My favorite story is a little 3-year-old boy who came out of the bathroom at school completely naked. And that's what they did at home. That was fine at home, but he's at school now. He can't do that anymore. So, just like we just had things that we did at home that we can't take into the world with us. And at 3, you don't know that, and so he just came out and had all of his clothes off, and they're like, buddy. And he's like, what? He's ready to sit in the class, and they had to get him dressed first. So. Oh, wow. Yeah. But yeah, if they're home all the time, they have no exposure to anything else, then why is it different? You just don't have those social skills. Yeah, there's so much more involved, definitely. Yeah. So what are some simple things that parents can do? I mean, we've talked a lot about the issues and what's causing this, but now are there solutions? Yeah, they're so easy and they're so fun. So, and I think there's some slides that I have that talk about vestibular activities that you can do, proprioceptive activities you can do, and deep pressure activities you can do as a family. But you just want to think swing, spin, hang upside down. So I think there's our hang, hop, hug, and then the next one. So these are all organizing activities for you. So swinging, spinning, good luck finding a merry-go-round. I always say that merry-go-rounds and swings have been replaced with I love that you say office chairs. Office chairs are great. Those are great. I always say lower them down as low as they go and spin them, and then just give them stuff. And every time they come around, they have to throw something in the garbage can, or, just make it a fun little game. Inversion, any way that you hang your head upside down. A lot of families will catch their kids watching TV, hanging upside down off of the couch. Toe touches,
I call it bats and butterflies. I'm just saying, when I say bats, go find a place to hang upside down. When I say butterflies, go find a place to spin gracefully. So that's a fun little way to do it. Inverted wall walk. Yeah. Just put your hands on the floor and walk your feet up the wall. And the passing balls over and under, inverted ball pushes, just hang upside down, roll the ball back and forth. You can do it academically. You can do spelling and counting while you're doing that, and make it a heavy ball. So you're doing proprioception and inversion.
Right. You got that heavy lifting.
And then rolling, like log rolls or front rolls, and again, if you're doing comparisons, you can roll down and find something that looks like, or that sounds like, or, go down and find 3 pictures that start with the letter A and then log roll back. So you can do tons of it in your homeschool environment, academically in a regular classroom. You can
and you're working so much on their core strength, where they're not using a lot of that core strength just sitting, because then they're slouching and their posture is getting off as well. And I notice when I have kids invert, because I do it often, being on the silks, but they're always not looking down. They're always looking up at their feet. And it's a struggle with many kids to get them to look down, because I think they don't feel safe, but they don't, when I show them and I'm like, which looks better, with me looking down at the ground or with me looking up here and having to hold my whole body up now? And it's like, you have to realize, when the straighter your body is, the easier it is to hold. But they internally don't even know that. They have to almost be shown or taught it.
Yeah, their vestibular system is the one that's like our foundational system. It's one tells you where your head is in space, just like proprioception tells you where your body is in space. It tells you where your head is in space. It has not had swinging, spinning, and hanging upside down. So in the silks, that's some of their first time of being inverted. And so they're like trying to return to what feels normal, which is not upside down. So that's funny that you see it there too.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then on the next slide is things that you can do that are calming for kids. And so carrying things. I would tell people, if you're using a weighted ball, use the weight of the number of years old your child is. So if you have a 4-year-old, use a 4-pound ball. I just don't exceed a 10-pound ball. So like after 10, if you're 12, still use a 10-pound ball. I'm not responsible. That turns into weightlifting when we get that heavy. So it's just, keep max out at 10, but you can that's how you figure out weighted ball to do weighted ball catches, slam them on the ground, joint pressure on a mini trampoline, any running, hopping, stomping, marching, like park as far away from the front door as you can and figure out how you're all going to get in there. Putting little 1-pound wrist weights. Exactly. Put a little 1-pound wrist weight on your ankles and on your wrists, and that really helps with proprioception and understanding where your body is. Any pushing, pulling, dragging, just a basic punching bag, doing the wheelbarrow walk, jump rope. Now, here's the thing: is jump rope is heavy motor planning. Like, so you have to know how to move your arms and your legs at the same time. So a lot of kids cannot do that. So I just get like the 3/4 inch rope at like Tractor Supply and tie it to the doorknob. And then I turn the rope and they get to jump, because I'm only trying to get them to jump. I don't care if they know how to do the motor planning. That's a whole separate goal. I just want them to jump. And so many kids come in and they're like, I'm like, we're going to jump rope. And they're like, Miss Heidi, I can't jump rope. I'm like, let's give it a try. And I'm like, I'm going to turn the rope and I'm going to tell you when to jump. And then they jump. They're like, I did it. I can jump rope, So it's a really big form too.
That's so cool.
And then the next slide.
And these are super easy things for parents to be able to do at home. Yeah. Those mini trampolines that they sell at Walmart, I think they're like $50, and they have like a little timer and counter on it. So it counts how many jumps and how long you're doing it. Oh, cool. Our boys love a good competition like that, so they love to see how long they can jump or how many jumps they can get. So it's a great way because proprioception you do till exhaustion. Like you really want to load that. Really?
The more you do, the more serotonin you get, which is calming. So you can't get too much serotonin. Spinning, on the other hand, on that first slide with the vestibular, that's the same system that gives you motion sickness. So you can overload that system. So that's really to tolerance, where the other one is to exhaustion.
Right. Okay. That's good to know.
Most of the things on there are fine. It's the spinning that will get you. So just if you have a sensitive vestibular system.
I was told by a physical therapist a few years ago that if you do get spinning too much, that if you use one of the actually strategies from the next slide, the weight or a pull-up, that it will reset that system. And that's what I do with my students, actually, because if you get super dizzy and then you do a heavy weight or a pull-up, the dizziness disappears. It's just
the one activates histamine, the other one activates serotonin. So you just kind of envision that serotonin flooding over the histamine and settling it down. And so it does. So just the simple things like just pushing your wrist together or interlacing your fingers and pushing down on your head, those give you joint pressure and will settle that overload feeling that your kids are getting on the silks, honestly. So you can always counter it. And that's why we do it. That's why we do it in this order of organize, then calm. And then the final set of exercises or connection ones on the next slide.
Okay. Yeah. Let me get there. Here we go. All right.
These are fun ones. You just get to squish them. You get to squish your kids. So like a family sandwich, like so dad lays down, then the child lays down, then mom lays down on top of them, or you can do a family hug like that and just squish them until they say, let go. You can wrap them up tight in a blanket or a towel. Just always keep the nose and mouth open so that they have access to breathe. Deep massage is great. Weighted blankets are great. If you're doing a weighted blanket, it's 10% of the child's body weight plus a pound. That's usually what I do. Squishing between two couch cushions, just couch cushion, child, couch cushion, sit on them.
So when I sat on my kids to get them in their car seats, it was probably a good thing for them.
It was so good. They felt so connected to you in that moment.
Yes.
Yeah. That's funny. I always joke, if they sell something therapeutically, it's 4 times the cost. And so there's pressure vests that you can get. They're like $100, if not more.
Oh, yes.
You can just go to Under Armour and buy a shirt a size too small. Like that does it. Like that'll give them a nice hug. Wear it under your clothes. There's resistive tunnels and body socks that kids can get into too. That's probably its own little presentation, honestly, because they're so fun to do. But they just crawl through and it just hugs them like a body sock, and they love that. So just anything like that is great. Just giving them deep input through their skin and muscles. It releases the dopamine, which helps them feel connected. I mean, that's why we hug people on purpose. There's a reason behind it, you know.
Right.
It's like
why you feel so good. Yeah. My husband, I think it was over break, he was saying, I just read this study, and that if you hug somebody for, so long, or I don't remember how many seconds it is, that it releases something. And he's like, okay, come on, let's try it. And he's like, after a while, this is feeling kind of awkward.
So there's the awkward hug too. Yes, absolutely. But there is we do that. That's why I tell you on this one, you just do it until they're like, that's enough. So like I have these big fuff, like they're huge bean bags, like 6-foot bean bags, and the kids will lay on them and they'll put another one on top of them, and then I'll sit on them. I'm like, just tell me when to get off. And we just sit there for a while, and they're like, that's enough, Miss Heidi. And then I just get off and we go on our way. So yeah, so the awkward hug your husband's talking about, yes, that one does exist too. I don't know if it gives you more dopamine. I'm not for sure about that.
Or maybe he's just been conditioned and that just seems like it's too much. I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah. So I want to make sure that we talk a little bit about group readiness as well. We had touched on that kind of at the beginning of our conversation, and you had talked about that as being part of learning readiness is for them to be able to participate in a group.
Yeah, the world functions in a group, like it just does. That's like we're designed. I mean, even I think spiritually we are too, because, in fellowship, like where 2 or more gather, like I think we're designed. So you have to show up to the group with skills enough to find success. And we did find, especially after the pandemic, kids were coming in with like very few group membership skills. And there's tons of them, but I really picked the top 3 that are a real game changer for a learning environment, which is holding a thought, being a first-time listener, and unentertained waiting. I think that there's a 4th one trying to push in on the scene, and it's recognizing a voice of authority. I think that we're really struggling with that as well. And so, and if I have to track it back, like I always have to, my first thing when I see an issue, I'm like, why, what is going on? But I think parents are on devices. And so the very first voice of authority a child hears, they're programmed to tune it out, because they don't, like if I want to watch my TV show and my parent is over here on the phone, I'm not going to listen to their voice. That's a really tough one that,
Absolutely. I never even thought about that. Yeah. I had one student come in recently and she was just sad because we have parents come in at the end of their session to be able to watch them. She goes, "Oh, my mom's on the phone again with my grandma." And it's like, it sounded like she's like on the phone with grandma all day. And the child was just completely ignored. And it's like, wow, there's just, they don't get hardly any attention anymore. And so,
it's
but damaging. To be mindful, because it's just addictive for adults alike. And so it's something you have to proactively work against to be able to change that as well.
I tell parents, I'm like, if you want to see how bad it is, I want you to ride an elevator without your phone in your hand. I want you to sit in a doctor's office without your phone in your hand and just see how, because I do it to myself. I don't like it either. Like it's super uncomfortable, but I do it just for the awareness of it, because I said, like in our little kids, they're learning to tune out all the voice of authority. So they come into a classroom and they might listen to their friends more than they hear their teacher, because those are the friends that have engaged with them, and so, and that's tricky because, again, there's spiritually a voice of authority that we need to be able to be silenced enough to hear. And then in a classroom, or when there's a teacher-student relationship, there's that voice of authority. And then you get out in the world and there's voices of authority, police officers and things like that you also have to be able to recognize and identify and respond appropriately to. And so as much as I mainly talk about holding a thought, being a first-time listener, and unentertained waiting, I think that other one's sneaking up there and going to make a showing on my recommendations as well. But holding a thought, we talked about that. That's a great one to practice at lunch. It's just your capacity to hold your thought until the appropriate time to say it, which there might not be one. You may not get to say every thought that comes to your head. And that's a tough one. And as parents, we're like, they're little geniuses. I want to hear everything they say. That's great, but the world doesn't. And to be in a group, sometimes you have a great thought and you just have to hold it. And you just have to hold it. And the meeting might be over and you still don't get to speak it. And so that's a really big one. Being a first-time listener, this is the definition of it, that you respond appropriately the first time I ask you in this voice without raising my voice, repeating myself, or becoming emotional.
Yes.
And every parent just busts out laughing because they're like, nope, I repeat myself, I yell, and I scream and cry. Like, that's how I get my child's attention. I'm like, so you taught them that. So now you have to teach them to respond to this voice. And so we're going to practice it. And so again, instead of taking a behavioral approach to the child and saying, you're not doing that, we're going to take an education approach and say, we're going to practice this. And it's going to be a skill we're going to learn as a family. So we're going to learn how to hold a thought. We're going to learn how to be a first-time listener. And we're collectively going to practice waiting and feeling the discomfort of waiting without entertainment, because you have to, even if you don't step foot in a school, let's just say you're homeschooled and you don't step foot in a school, you have to wait in line at sporting events. You have to wait in line when you try to check out during Christmas time at any store. Like, there's all this waiting that we have to be able to do successfully, and we may or may not be entertained.
Yeah, that's it goes over to every area of a child's life, and as they start to become an adult, and better to teach these things before they become a teenager because their exposure to so many things just increases, and you don't have the ability to, regulate where they go, what they do, who they listen to, and if they're able to stop themselves. These are all life skills that you're talking about. And I love that you bridge the gap to the spiritual side too. Can you talk a little bit more about that as well? Because I think we forget that, as we talked, this is this discussion topic in general was the whole child readiness instead of just learning readiness. And so there's that spiritual component too. And it does bleed over into our ability to hear God and just be able to grow spiritually. So love your thoughts on that too.
All of that. I do think that we don't like to hear the Holy Spirit or the still small voice or God's voice, whatever the language you use. You have to stop. Like you have to stop, and we don't stop, And then I just love the image of the armor of God, that we put on this armor, we get ourselves ready for the world.
Right.
And we do, and so this is like some families will come in and they'll understand that, but then not understand learning readiness. And then some families come in and understand learning readiness and then like, oh my gosh, I never thought about our spiritual readiness. Even just like, we don't know the day and time. And you want to always approach God's kind of ordered us, given us the tools to be ready. And so it just aligns so perfectly with kind of what he expects of us. And then when you think he's got a purpose for each one of us, and for us to fulfill that, we have to show up ready. Like Absolutely. If you think about the day, you think about the day, here's what it looks like. You get ready for the demand, and how you respond to the demand is your performance. So it's kind of ready, demand, performance. That's your day. That's my day. That's every child's day. For a child, they get ready, they go to school. That's the demand. Their performance is their output, their how they responded, how they learned. And when we have an issue, we circle on demand and child performance. We're like, well, maybe the demand wasn't right. Maybe I didn't teach it correctly. Maybe I'm not a good teacher. Maybe it's me. Or we do, what's wrong with the child? Maybe he has a learning disability. Maybe he's not listening. Maybe he's lazy. Maybe he doesn't want to try. But we very rarely stop and say, was the child ready in the first place? And so many times now, because of the world we grow up in, our children aren't ready. And we're not ready spiritually because we don't slow down long enough to listen. We're not ready regulation wise because we can't find a darn swing or merry-go-round anyway. We're not ready physically because we sit all the time. We don't have the endurance to really give it our all. And so we're not only missing God's design in the bigger picture, but even on the day-to-day, we're missing just being able to perform to our fullest potential. And that's what every parent wants for their child. And that's what our parent wants for us too. Like that's what God wants for us, is to have us show up here every day and perform to our fullest potential on his behalf. And and he gives us all the tools to get ready and do it, and then, so it aligns so beautifully with it. So it's
Absolutely.
Sweet.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah. And if you don't take that time and you don't, I can just see so many of my homeschool days of the past, it's, getting my kids ready, and we built in a little devotional here, but it wasn't as purposeful as this is preparing our hearts. And then what are we doing physically to prepare our bodies? What are we doing mentally to prepare our minds? And now we're ready to learn. And so just listening to you, I'm looking at this and going, just the whole way we can restructure our homes so that readiness is kind of built in at the front end. Just like when you build, a full day lesson plan, that, let's think about this first before we start just pulling the books out and saying, well, let's just get school done. And how much more successful would we be if we had approached every day like that? I'm sure by mistake or, God's divine intervention, many days I was able to do that without even knowing what I was doing. But it's different to be intentional.
Yeah, that's what's so sweet about the homeschool environment, is that you do have so much more say in it. You're not busy lining up 16 kids to wait to go to recess or to wait to go to PE or anything. So you have that freedom to do it, but it's a heavy weight to homeschool too, to feel fully responsible. That's where God comes in, because we're not fully responsible for anything, but you can sure, as a mom who's doing it, sort of burden your mind and your heart with it a little bit. So.
Absolutely. Yes. And on top of it, you're readying yourself for the day as well with your kids. And a lot of times I just remember thinking, oh, I got to be prepped before my kids get up. And why not incorporate my own readiness with them? They're there with me. I'm there with them. God has a purpose in this. So they are not a distraction. They're just integrated into your life a whole lot more.
Well, they learn through modeling too. Like they learn from our actions far more than they learn from our words. And so watching you get ready and taking care of yourself and seeing this sense of learning readiness as part of self-care instead of a checklist or something horrible. It's such a game changer for them. So you're right.
Absolutely. Yeah. They definitely pick up more that you do than what you say.
Absolutely.
No matter how intentional you are on that one.
Yes. And you get to see that every day. Like there's nothing more than like watching your child do something you've done. And you're like, oh, yes, I'm going to own that. Good or bad. I'm going to own that. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, this conversation has been so amazing. I'm surprised we just got 5 minutes left, but I would love for you to talk about just some of the things that you offer for parents and families. And I'm going to share your websites as you're talking about that, and just what you want to kind of share as your closing, just encouragement or whatever else is on your mind and heart.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina, and we haven't, like you had said, it's T.O.T.S, Tringali O.T. So I love a good acronym. And we serve kids in independent schools and we have a clinic. So if you're not in the schools we go to, you can come to our clinic. And it is a ton of providing a new lens. Like it's the most beautiful journey because people come to OT in a very hard place. Like you don't come to OT because you're having a great time. You come to OT because life is hard. And to have the privilege of like partnering with these families and walking out of that with them is, like I said, I just don't see retirement in my future because it's the most beautiful, like it's a privilege to get to do that. And so that's what we get to do. We have the privilege of just, families coming in being like, we're at our wits' end. I just this morning, I got a video of a kid throwing down and the mom's like, we don't know what to do. And I was like, oh, that's perfect. Like my heart just is like, I know what to do. I can help you with that.
I'm not thinking that's perfect, but yes.
Yes. They were not thinking it was perfect. They thought that was one of the worst mornings they had had. And I was like, we got this. And so I get to do that. But as it's a very physical job and I'm getting old. Yeah. And so it's been a nice, yes. And so the transition has been to be able to talk about it and teach it. And this year we're planning on publishing a book called The Ready Child. And so I'm just going to get it out there because I feel like families need the support. Teachers need the support and other OTs need the support. Like it's just a different lens to look at kids through. And if you have the right lens for your child, there's nothing better. And I as parents, the one thing I want to leave you with is that, call it what you may, it's the Holy Spirit, it's your inner voice, it's your heart, but listen to that. You are the expert on your child. And the world tells you you're not. The world tells you need one of everything. You need an OT and a PT and a speech therapist and a doctor and an audiologist, and you don't. At baseline, God handpicked that child and said, you're the person for them. And so that to me is like, I see so many parents who have just given up on that. And I'm like, no, you don't even need me. You have everything by God's design. You have everything you need for that child. So go with it. And you are the gatekeeper for your child, the gatekeeper of your head, your heart, and your home. And you get to decide whose opinions come in, and not everybody's get to come in.
Yes, that's so true. Yeah. And God will give you a sense of peace about what is in his plan. And if you feel anxiety, it's one of the biggest things I always told parents when I was working as a consultant is if you feel anxious about this and like you got to do it right now or else it's going to go away, then that's not God. It's he doesn't work that way.
Work like that way. Yeah,
he has a peace and it will all work out in his timing. And he would never rush you to make a decision. That's the enemy speaking right there.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so funny you say that. I used to tell my kids that when they were little. They were like, Mom, I got to know. I'm like, do you need to know right now? Because if you need to know right now, you already know the answer. It's no.
Right.
If you're going to give me time to think about it, you have a much better chance of the answer changing.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, so good. Well, thank you so much for this conversation. And thank you all for joining us for this this show. We were live. And just want to encourage you to check out Heidi's resources, and can't wait for that book to come out. That sounds exciting and like an incredible resource for parents and educators alike, and parent educators as well.
Yes.
Yeah. And like you said, it's just becoming a pandemic in itself, that we're just seeing so much of this, and like you said, good intentions, but just steering us wrong in parenting strategies and just life in general, and how we're navigating the world as all of this tech and all of these studies that we only like half know the results of, like the child on their back. That would have never even related that to some of the things that we're seeing as being one of the main contributors. So, but yeah, we learn as we go, and God has a lot of grace for everything. So don't feel like, oh man, I really messed up and I just learned all the things that I did wrong. That's okay. God knew. And he also knows a lot of things that he gave Heidi to help you get through that. So, and you'll get more. So, well, thank you so much. Just appreciate all that you had to share with us. Next week, we're going to be talking about play and the importance of play. And so you'll want to join us back for that conversation. I know I had a conversation a couple of years ago on the show about that, and just how play helps your children to be able to actually learn better. So we're going to go into that. And so hopefully you can join us back for that conversation next week. So until then, thanks again, Heidi. Appreciate all your wisdom and your time for sharing with us. And thank you all for joining us. Take care. God bless. And we'll see you next time here on Empowering Homeschool Conversations. Bye, everyone. I want to take just a second to thank the team at Life Audio for their partnership with us on this podcast. If you go to lifeaudio.com, you'll find dozens of other faith-centered podcasts in their network. They've got shows about prayer, Bible study, parenting, and more.
This has been Empowering Homeschool Conversations.
Looking for inspiration and uplifting stories of faith? Welcome to the Jesus Calling Stories of Faith podcast, now available on Life Audio. Join us each week for heartfelt conversations and personal stories from people from all walks of life that will inspire you and lift your spirit. Whether you're seeking comfort, motivation, or just a moment of peace, the Jesus Calling Stories of Faith podcast offers a beautiful reminder of faith and hope. Listen to the Jesus Calling Stories of Faith podcast on lifeaudio.com or wherever you find your podcasts.